Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crownsmen Energy. I'm your host, Jared Downey. Joining me today is my co-host, Gowdy Molina.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Okay, we are going to get right into it. We've got a great guest on the show today, Joy Romero. Joy is the VP of Technology and Innovation at Canadian Natural. She's also the president at Clean Resources Innovation Network, or CRIN, as you might know it. We are going to cover a lot, including federal funding that is coming from CRIN, the Canada's place in the energy sector. I mean, we're just going to cover a lot of topics. So, Gowdy, I'm going to get you to give a shout out to. We have a few sponsors today.
We do
So
5.
five. So I
So bear with me.
just read really fast. I like on Spotify you can now you can listen to the podcast in like double time.
Ooh,
So you can go,
really fast.
yeah, you just blow through it. And I talk slow enough, so I'm sure people take advantage of that on this show. Okay.
All right, perfect. So let's get into our sponsors. Today we have MNP who bring us question of the week. And today we have Jason J. Lee. He is partner of technology solutions at MNP. And today's question is, when talking about digital transformation, how do you foster a climate of innovation in an organization while at the same time managing costs and risks?
Well, if we take AI and ML initiatives as an example, we see lots of science fair projects that can end up in a couple of scenarios. On the one hand, these innovation projects will have not aligned to any strategic initiatives and will likely be collecting dust on the shelf somewhere. And on the other hand, some of these projects actually have extremely positive results, but for one reason or another, they will never deploy at scale or be production ready. Neither are good positions to be in. As companies continue to look at ways to leverage their own data and make it more valuable, and whether that's to develop smarter products and services, optimize processes, automate some of their tasks, this practice of innovation is best set up to succeed by being agile and applying common sense, building a team of not just data scientists, identifying the most important business use cases to create maximum value, and then having some sort of test to validate. So, for example, like if this use case ceased to exist tomorrow, will someone care? Who, right? How much? Otherwise, before you know it, you're in deep spending hundreds of thousands of dollars with no clear understanding of whether that use case makes any sense. So before spending lots of money and resources, I would say identify good candidate projects, understand your business, your strategic initiatives, and your data. Be thoughtful, assemble the right team, balance those innovations with common sense, and then obviously approach things with agility. And if you don't, we're here to help you.
Alrighty, if you would like more information, you can contact Jason at jasonj.lee@mnp.ca. You can also visit their website at mnp.ca. Next up, we also have Savinaw Equipment. Are you working on pipelines, oil and gas projects, renewable energy, or LNG, and need to save some cash? Savinaw Equipment has industrial pumps, electrical equipment from motors to transformers, and even surplus pipe and much, much more available now. You can visit them at savinawequipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. And we also have Precision Bolting. Precision Bolting's products have been a trusted solution for over 35 years, used by hundreds of clients across all industries, including major heavy equipment manufacturers. Equipment like mining trucks to shovels, pumps to conveyors, turbines to heat exchangers are only a few. Well known for superior technical support and the ability to focus on customer needs, Precision Bolting should be the first call for anyone wanting to address difficult bolting solutions. This this focus on solving problems has led them to develop a range of kitted bolting solutions used around the world. From service tech to shareholder, Precision Bolting's values of safer, sooner, and stronger become immediately obvious. Give their team a call, connect with them on LinkedIn, or visit them at precisionbolting.com and miningkitsolutions.com. You can also catch Precision Bolting's episode featuring their president Ken Gamroth on the Crownsman Show. So you can also check them out there. Next up, we have Vega. Vega Instruments Canada is a proud sponsor of Crownsmen Energy. They help Their customers operate more safely and efficiently with reliable and accurate level and pressure measurement instrumentation. Using radar, pressure, radiometric, and other technologies, Vega Canada has helped countless mining and energy companies improve their processes. Learn more about their solutions at vega.com. You can find instrumentation, download documentation, or generate 3D drawings and configure a sensor all at vega.com. And last but not least, Power Zone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with Power Zone. Visit them at powerzone.com. There we go.
I just realized you probably speak more than I do on the show
Just
because
did sponsors.
I just ask questions. You do the sponsors and the guest does all the talking. It's a good gig that I've got.
Wow.
Hello,
We
Joy.
can switch.
Yeah, exactly. Hello, Joy. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Jared. Thank you for the invitation.
We'll jump right into it. Usually on the show, I do sort of a professional section towards the end, but in your case, looking at your career, you've been I think you've been with Canadian Natural for 20 years. For over 20 years,
Mhm.
you're the VP of Technology and Innovation, and now you're the president of CRIN. And I just kind of want to start a little bit at the beginning and kind of get a sense of, where did your career start, and sort of, what you've achieved in your career. Is that what you envisioned at the beginning?
No, when I graduated from university, I'm a metallurgical engineer. Graduated from Technical University of Nova Scotia, which is now part of Dalhousie. Many, many, many years ago, over 40 years ago, and just very naively was excited to be an engineer and get out there and do what engineers do. And my husband and I met in university. Actually, we were married in university. When we graduated, we couldn't afford to travel or do those kinds of things, so we actually took a work term in Europe and worked at Hovens in the Netherlands, which is a steel plant, and great start for metallurgical engineers. And it was a phenomenal experience and quite an eye opener. For a Canadian that had traveled across the country and grew up across the country, because my father was in mining construction, but I hadn't left Canada. So great eye opener to travel over to Europe for that initial work experience. And then we came back to Canada and went to Labrador, and we worked at Wabash Mines in Labrador. And I love the North. I had grown up in the North as a child, many times in mining communities as they were growing, and actually had lived in Wabash and Lab City when they were being developed. So they weren't new to me, knew exactly what we were getting into, and phenomenal place to start your career, because northern communities, number one, attract, in my mind, just the most wonderful people. And because most people are away from families, you also create bonds with those that are there, and workforces, etc. So just a phenomenal environment with various people who are very generous in helping young people learn. And because they are remote, the opportunity to learn quickly and gain accountabilities that potentially you wouldn't gain in other areas, of course, are there as well. So just a great place to start your career. From there, and I was working in the plant as a process engineer. So really great hands-on experience. We started our family actually, and worked and went back to work there. But before our second child was born, I actually resigned to stay home with our children. And in that period of time, we moved from Labrador to the Elk Valley, to the coal mining area in southeastern BC for metallurgical coal. And I stayed home. We had another child, and I stayed home for 7 years full time with my very busy young family. But in that time, you'll often have people say, well, how did you grow your career in that period of time? One, I learned to deal with a lot and to be able to balance that home life with 3 little ones under 5, and was very active in the volunteer community. So in all the various associations, sports associations, and there's great leadership opportunities in those associations, and working inside of your communities and being a part of what drives, what's important to drive what's successful for small communities, to be those communities and to have things available for children and others. So those are not skills that should be, they're not discounted in how they serve you in your career overall by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm a bit of a continuous learner. So in that, probably a serial continuous learner. So in that period of time, was continually adding things to the skill set that would be hugely advantageous when I went back into the workforce. And so I did. When I went back in, I somebody that I had worked with in Labrador actually came to the Elk Valley and had the opportunity to go back to work part-time, which was still important to me because that balance between being able to participate in my children's classrooms and just the excitement of being able to get back to work was really just a phenomenal blend for me for a number of years. Again, as the kids were small, I could actually see from my office, which was on the side of a beautiful mountain looking down to the school. I could see when the school buses would leave, and I could actually get home before the kids got home. So it was pretty cool from that point of view. So just that whole balance thing was wonderful for me, and still able to grow my career technically. We came from the Elk Valley to Calgary and got involved. I worked for Kilburn, got involved with Millennium at Suncor in the development of the Millennium plant and led the process design for that. And from there, jumped over to Canadian Natural for the development of the Horizon project. And so was a part of the design, stewarded through the build, had the privilege of leading bitumen production and commissioning. And, once we got those things up and running, in the mineral processing side of things, or the front end design, things are continuously changing and you're always innovating. You never build the same thing twice, and you're always trying to do something better. And so had the opportunity to take that innovation component from bitumen production to be accountable for bitumen production for oil sands overall. And that was a really critical time when, not that we weren't innovating before, but the pace of innovation, had to pick up. And so it was really important for us as a company to make sure,
Oh, no, I'm drinking water continuously during these interviews, so no, it's good.
It's just so dry in Alberta. It's wonderful. So, it's really important to pick up that pace of innovation and to have the focus to make sure that we were moving things as quickly as we could. And then, of course, that evolved from doing that for Horizon to over time for doing that for Canadian Natural overall, which is the position that I hold now. And so it's been just an amazing ride. And when I graduated from university, if I ever thought that I would be a part of, designing, building, commissioning, bringing on mega projects, and then having the privilege of leading technology and innovation for the largest oil and gas company in the country, not in a million years. I was just happy to go and be an engineer and do good things, which I hope is what I've always done. And I think that that's, if you're happy in it and you love it, you work hard. Those are the things that allow a career to grow.
I
So
have a,
for me, yeah,
oh,
it's been
sorry, go ahead.
privileged.
Um,
No, that's fine.
I was, when you were talking about, that transitioning and then having 4 kids, 7 years off, but then volunteering, and do you, in a position that you have now, when we get into CRIN, your position with Canadian Natural, um, did that did the are there tangible tools that you see that you've developed out of raising, I mean, not just one kid or two, but 4 kids, so there's those different ages, and I come from a big family, so I know the dynamic of of that sort of environment, and then the volunteer work, and then transitioning back into part-time, then eventually into full-time. And did you do you have tangible lessons that you sort of take with you from all that balancing and those different transitions and sort of dealing with essentially society at a different level of being a mother, volunteer, and then also on a professional level?
Very much. That flexibility. You have to plan, and then be prepared to deviate from the plan. And so plan for those deviations all the time, and be prepared. I was a girl guide growing up, and that be prepared component, right, was to something that was really important to learn, and not to be fussed about that. You deviate, you deal with it, and then, okay, how could I have done that better? Go back. But it's also, I think, those of us who are technical, certainly me, um, very black and white. Science is this, it's that. And even when I went to university, electives that I should have done that were in the softer side of things, I stuffed economics in those. Later on, did an MBA. Love that side of the world as well. And but just no gray, right? Just
Mhm.
no gray. But the very first thing you discover when you graduate is that the world is gray. And that's exactly what you're dealing with all the time, with the privilege of dealing. There are, 10 right ways to do things. Pick one, execute. These are the types of things, and dealing with a family, that things just happen constantly. Now, I actually only had 3, but they were 3 under 5.
Oh,
And
sorry.
I have 8 grandchildren now. So, but that's all right. It's there were always lots of others around. So the number was,
Like 10.
by the number of shoes. Yeah, the number of shoes at the door were definitely more than 3.
Yeah.
But so it prepares you, and I think the other thing that I did is that I actually did early childhood ed, not because I wanted to be work in that, but I had 3 children under 5, and to learn the skills to be able to parent, I took early childhood ed to be, I hoped, a good parent. And so it's just that constant learning. But those are skills; they're people skills, and whether or not it's listening respectfully to your child or listening respectfully to somebody else, that's those aren't different.
Mm.
So they're life skills that take us to various components. I also was a school trustee in our community in Fernie. So in that period of time, so of having leadership roles in the volunteer places I was, often chair of organizations, and or obviously as a school trustee, you learn governance, and you learn the governance side or the oversight or the big picture of something to make something work. And
Mm.
so as you move through your career, if you've had the opportunity to see governance, you understand where you fit in as part of the story to make something whole work, which is really important as well. If you can learn in these things to understand, this is my part that I play of this whole larger institution, but what is that? And can you look at things from various points, and how can I grow and contribute to the path of that larger institution by understanding the various levels of a company? So the volunteer roles, that you can gain tremendous experience that can obviously both in volunteer as a doer, volunteer as the governance side of things. But I've always held on to a volunteer component in my life. I think it's important that we give back. So still balance the volunteer,
Still
the
balancing.
work, the family as well.
Um,
Which is everybody does that, right? We all do it.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting you brought up that understanding your place in that bigger picture as that volunteer. I don't need to get into what it is, but I just recently joined a committee, and I'm used to the very small business sort of world is where I come out of. So I'm very used to there's a job to get done. Who's going to do it? Okay, let us know when it's done, or we'll maybe review it next week. But it's basically just flat out, and you just go. And I very after one meeting, I realized that is not the situation here. There's all these different levels and different voices, and you need very quickly. I learned I'm going to have to learn how to collaborate in a way that I haven't had to do before. And this is a volunteer position, and I'm thinking this might be the hardest job I've ever had. So I can appreciate what you're saying, that those volunteers actually, the positions in those, especially in these larger organizations, actually prepare you for the structure that you're going to face later in your career.
They do. They very, very, very much do. And, people always thank you for what you give inside of these things. And I go, I'm not sure the balance is that I actually got a heck of a lot more out of that than I actually gave. But,
Exactly.
It's very much a two-way street.
Joy, I want to transition because you're very much in the heart of the Canadian energy sector, really. I mean, you're located in Alberta, but obviously Canadian Natural is a global company. And the innovation that CRIN is going to push out is going to affect, it's going to be at a global stage as well. So I kind of wanted to get a sense from you, and I've been asking this question to various experts that come on the show, but I'm really interested to know your perspective of where Canada sits in the energy sector and on that sort of global stage from your perspective.
So I think one of the things that Canada and its natural resources industry, whether it's energy or mining or other things, we are always leaders, and we take what we do here and help that transition to other parts of the globe. We're innovators, we're drivers, we get things done. And we do that always with that we can improve it. We can always minimize our footprint. We can increase our productivity. We can, our safety records, all of these types of things. So the whole environmental safety, productivity component is extremely important to us as Canadians. We function in a very difficult environment. We're geographically dispersed. We're a small population. We have to work together to help each other survive and grow. So we tend to be collaborative in the way in which we work, which is really important. That's another space I played in all of my career. And so through that, we can actually accelerate the pace of innovation. So the oil and gas industry in Canada, actually, when a lot of other sectors we're not putting as much into innovation, we're actually leaders of that. Not something that's often well understood, but sort of, for example, between 2009 and 2015, we increased the monies and investment in innovation by 1,400%, according to Stats Canada. And so that's a pretty phenomenal feat and why do you do that? Because it's so imperative. If we don't innovate, how are we going to meet the cost pressures, the productivity, the environmental components that are there? It won't happen. But our industries themselves are birthed from innovation. We come from pretty difficult starting places, and it's innovation that actually launches these. Certainly launches the oil sands, launches, the horizontal drilling in oil and gas. Those are Canadian Canadian inventions, Canadian innovation and entrepreneurship. So it's in our DNA. It's who we are.
Yeah, and I think we I don't know about on a global stage. I think we underrate ourselves a little bit, which is one of the goals of this show. Is, and I quite often talk about being a Vancouver show that is a lot of our guests are coming from Alberta, and a huge amount of our audience is from Ottawa and back east. So it's that I hopefully still in the sort of humble Canadian way, but sharing a little bit more, even if it's just with each other, of the innovation that we're doing. And the and to transition into that, I want to talk about Canadian Natural, because you started. I'm going to make sure I get my notes right. You started with the Horizon Oil Sands. That was your first introduction,
Mhm.
basically, to Canadian Natural. And even that, over the years, I mean, they've in reduction and things like that, they've really excelled. Can you sort of touch on that as sort of what you've seen over the years, with specifically with the Horizon?
So, I had the privilege, of course, being with it from literally the very beginning. I was the second employee with Canadian Natural for the Horizon project. And what a lot of people don't realize, Horizon is, we as a company actually have 4 carbon capture and something facilities. At Horizon, we have a carbon capture for our hydrogen plant, and the CO2 is actually used in the tailings process. We developed that process, the design for that, in about 2003. And so that kind of vision for footprint reduction, for capturing CO2. And why did we do that? Because CO2, when it's added, it was actually we needed to adjust the pH in our water, and CO2 was a waste product that we could capture and actually use there, cheaper than any other reagent that would do that for us. And so that whole philosophy around design of capturing waste and using them from something else, so we're waste to valuable product, is a very important component. Now, what that has done, multiplied many times over many things, is our operating costs, for example, were in the range of $34 Canadian a barrel. Now are 20 and or less. In that same time, our greenhouse gas footprint went from a 38% reduction from when we started to now. So it's always looking at how can you do things better. Obviously, there's the impression that these things are externally imposed, and certainly the environment that you're in can help accelerate those kinds of things. But just doing business well, and I think that's what often isn't understood in that reputation of Canadian industry, is that link between footprint reduction and cost reduction are direct. They go in parallel. And so it's really important to realize that. And I think that's a leadership role that Canada often takes, Canadian Natural certainly takes. And many of those things they're not isolated to Canadian Natural, because we actually work collaboratively inside of the Canada's Oil Sands Innovation Alliance, for example, and many other collaborative groups. So CRIN isn't the first. There are actually many collaborative groups. PTAC on the conventional side of things, Petroleum Technology Alliance of Canada, same thing. This very rich collaborative community and history of that. So as we innovate inside of our companies, that innovation is often shared and adopted by others, which, as the sector, then reduces our footprint as a sector, makes us more competitive as a sector in Canada versus other countries as a whole. But that progression is really important. So Horizon is one version of that. The exact same thing happens at Albion. The exact same things happens in our thermal groups. The exact same thing happens in our offshore. The exact same thing happens in our conventional area. So it's very much the DNA of the company to always look, how can you be better tomorrow than you are today, but with that absolute vision of reducing costs, reducing footprint, ensuring that people are safe. It's very much an integrated package.
You've mentioned a couple times already about sharing, and I think that is probably a good time to then look towards CRIN and what the work that organization is doing. And can you first just give the scope of sort of what CRIN is and the sort of the mandate that it was started with, and then we'll sort of expand into some of these programs. I know there's a huge amount of funding coming federally. I believe it's $100 million. So I want to sort of unpack, but I want to sort of step back to the beginning so that the audience has a good understanding of what CRIN is.
So we're very blessed as an industry, as an oil and gas industry across in Canada, even though sometimes it's not very positively spoken of. Hopefully that's changing. People understand the first of all, our drive to do things right and the contribution that we make, and they're understanding better what we really do. The engagement in the innovation space across Canada for the oil and gas industry is phenomenal. There's not a province across the country that doesn't have provincial, federal institutions, private institutions, from universities to research groups to entrepreneurs that aren't invested in innovation and R&D to help us improve our productivity, our footprint, our safety, regardless. That we have this very fulsome innovation ecosystem across the country. Well, of course, we're very geographically dispersed. And when you're geographically dispersed like that, it's very hard to have all of that coordinated and understand what the others are doing. And so one of the things that's so important now is to be able to, it's great that we've done stuff in the past, but as we go forward, with the pace at which we have developed has to accelerate, has to be faster, has to, if it took us 10 years to do something from design to commercialization before, we need to try and do that in 5. If it took us 3, we need to do that in 6 months. Like, it's that whole acceleration component of delivering better environmental performance, better lower costs. And by the way, not that those performance are bad, because we actually rank second in the world from environmental and second in the world from a social governance point of view for all oil and gas producers across the world. So we're not laggards in this, but we want to do better. So what was really important, we thought as industry, and so that's not just Canadian Natural. It's Suncor, it's Imperial, Cenovus. It's the industry players coming together, both conventional oil sands, the whole gamut, offshore. Is what can we do? How can we create a pool, and how can we focus all of these groups across the country in the entire ecosystem to, number one, understand what our gaps are, and number two, really accelerate things. And so that was the premise of the birth of CRIN. And so who do you actually pull together to do that? And about the same time that we were birthing CRIN, we actually became familiar with a group called Rainforest. And Rainforest, I mean, you always hear how do you recreate Silicon Valley? How do you make sure that you have that level of innovation come out, but also adoption, commercialization and adoption. And rainforest, there were some, really visionary leaders that brought rainforest to Alberta and invited us as the CRIN leadership team at the time to understand what it was that they were doing. And in that, it really was, it's about the development of an ecosystem so that it naturally feeds and it pulls the right, it has inside of the ecosystem the right players that support that ability for something to come from an idea through to commercialization, but then also into widespread adoption and pulling together players that we wouldn't necessarily have pulled together before. And this was really important when it came to actually who sits at the CRIN table. And we actually pulled together 20 different sectors around the CRIN table. And I just want to make sure here that, and I'm not going to list all 20, but is in that bunch is so it's not just R&D like the universities, it's not just us as industry, it's not just government that sits at the table. So we actually have the regulators are there, we have students that are there so that you have the next generation. We make sure that it's both the funders and the developers are there. So inside of governments, there's actually the like I said, for example, and NRCan sit at the CRIN table. But we also have municipal governments, provincial governments, and federal governments. We have the investment community is there, which is really, really, really important to sit around the table with us. We have First Nations that sit with us. It's extremely important that all of the sectors that actually touch innovation from its idea to commercialization to widespread adoption. So we also have the end users at the table. So we're very fortunate to have a group called Quest out of Toronto that sits out of our table that actually advises a nonprofit group that helps advise communities develop their net zero communities. And so it really is who needs to be there to make sure everything at every stage is supported at maximum speed so that you actually have not just commercialization, but widespread adoption. So what's the goal of this? Canada is a global leader in clean hydrocarbons from source to end use. So what many people don't realize is that the technologies that we develop to reduce our footprint from a greenhouse gas point of view, we're actually technologies, they deal with basically using natural gas. If they reduce our footprint in the use of natural gas, they also reduce the footprint in the use for natural gas for cement plants, for steel plants, for your home, my home. These technologies are transferable. So as industry, even though we are developing to reduce our footprint, they also reduce the footprint of the end users. So very much a gift that keeps giving. But those entrepreneurs that we help launch obviously are launched in many different, can then transfer to many other sectors. So very often groups will launch with us. They jump to ag, they jump to cement, they jump to mining, they jump to forestry, they jump to buildings in downtown Calgary or other areas. Those transition points are there. But remember, I shared with you before that the oil and gas industry was the industry in Canada that was putting that money in innovation. And we have the machine. We are able, we have the pathways, the discipline, the structures already to pilot quickly and to commercialize. And so those steps are really important. But this whole CRIN component is about us being very clear about what our needs are in 7 different theme areas and being able to attract those entrepreneurs to come with us, to pilot, to commercialize, to make that commercialization understood. So for example, the Trade Commission is a part of CRIN. And to date already, inside of the theme areas, they have taken a number of entrepreneurs And they have marketed those entrepreneurs globally already, as in CRIN's history. So it's not just about reducing our footprint inside of our industry, but it's growing Canadian entrepreneurs across the country in a virtual network to, again, remember I talked about why does Silicon Valley work? Well, you have this density geographically in one spot. In Canada, we don't have that anywhere. So we have to create a network of networks and create that virtual density, which is what CRIN is about. So CRIN meetings, even though I sit here in Calgary, it's irrelevant. It's this virtual connection is how CRIN lives. So when, current times, we're all living virtually, it was nothing for CRIN because that was how we existed anyways. And CRIN meetings, CRIN organizations, CRIN events are literally coast to coast to coast, and everybody everywhere in between. We also don't limit participation to Canada with a virtual component that isn't necessary, but our primary focus is Canadian entrepreneurs. Others are welcome, and others are also welcome to learn our benefit. So it's a very different model, which is why you have somebody like myself, who's president of CRIN. It is a volunteer role, but it's an industry pull. We've been very fortunate through the funding that we've received from the federal government that it helps us staff. So I've got somebody to help as well as the other volunteers, but we literally have an entire volunteer structure with CRIN, supported by a very CRIN Inc. Small contract staff members. But the focus is the person-to-person connection to drive that people understand what our gaps are, to drive solutions to come to us, to drive those pilots to take place, and then to push those technologies out wherever they may go.
It's sort of an amazing thing that's been put together, and I want to go from two different sides on it, which you already touched on, but I just want to unpack them a bit. When you and I were sort of talking to get ready for the interview, you mentioned something, and I think we're going to adopt it here at Crownsmen, called the too hard pile, which is really something that CRIN can help solve. So I want you to talk about that because it's such a simple phrase, but anybody who's in technology or trying to grow a business or is dealing with a team, as soon as you say the too hard pile, they go, uh-huh. So I want you to talk about that. And then if we could, once we touch on that, then swing back around to someone with an innovative product and how that they get into the network. And so that we sort of see it from those two
Sure.
different angles.
Absolutely. So one of the first things that we did when we were pulling CRIN together is we actually reached out to the Canadian ecosystem, and we gathered about 140 of the oil and gas, either their pathways or their plan, or what is your oil and gas plan for the next 10, 20, 30 years? What does that look? What research are you doing? And then as companies, we overlaid ours on those, and we looked at what was getting done and what wasn't getting done. And of course, if our goal is Canada is a global leader in clean hydrocarbons from source to end use, what is it that we would have to work on? So the too hard pile. And so for us, that too hard pile, we ended up with 7 different theme areas, which are water technology, digital oil and gas, novel land and well site remediation, methane monitoring, quantification and abatement, low emissions value added products, novel hydrocarbon extraction, and cleaner fuels. So it's a bit of a long list, but those are the areas. You'll notice tailings isn't in there. Tailings is being very well taken care of and driven under COSIA. So all of these other organizations that are out there in that very diverse group, they're all part of CRIN. They're part of the networks of networks. So we build on what's going out there. For example, in the cleaner fuels, it's actually the CRIN arm of Clean Fuels is the Canadian Fuels Association. So we didn't go out and recreate, but we knew we needed to bring them to the table in a formal way and support them in being more transparent what our issues are and how you work through. Same thing with methane monitoring, quantification and abatement. That we actually work through PTAC, and they are really good in the methane space. And in other words, so they are the CRIN arm for methane. Water technology is led by Suncor, and they've developed a water technology development center on behalf of the oil sands industry, but it also welcomes oil and gas innovation for oil and gas overall. That stretch of that facility was facilitated through CRIN to have a broader group. Digital oil and gas, there were copious groups of that. We've managed, a number of them still exist, but they can come together under the CRIN umbrella, again, to focus, to drive, to meet what our needs are. Same thing on land and well site remediation. That's led by our friends at Initech, Alberta, and low emissions value added products has been led by out of Alberta Innovates, actually. Novel hydrocarbons have been led by out of COSIA. So we really, again, our goal is not to recreate anything inside of CRIN, but it is to bring it together. It is to focus it, and it is to drive results in a very shorter time. So we actually don't, it's funny, we pull things together and we create connections, but CRIN itself doesn't execute the R&D, others do, but we enable those connections to take place. And then once things are successful, we also have the ability to amplify those successes real quick, which for an entrepreneur who's developing, you must see many times. It's huge. If you can accelerate that time, they often die. They'll have good products, but they die.
They can't get it that middle, that sort of those last 3 feet before the actual journey starts. They can't get it just that last little bit, production, those types of things, right?
Correct. So CRIN is absolutely designed to support them literally through that entire cradle. And financing, the financial support that's there, yes, we're very fortunate to have the 100 million come to us from the federal government. So we, in fact, are a funder ourselves. But we also are tied into the angel, VCs, pension funds, big banks. Those also are a part of the CRIN network. And they're really important because government funding is one aspect to an entrepreneur or to oil and gas companies from an R&D execution point of view, but so is the right type of financing. So it isn't always, government funding is not necessarily the right, it's a component of financing for an entrepreneur, but it's not the total picture. And so what's really important to all of these groups is they want to know, of course, every entrepreneur is they're the best things since sliced bread, and they're going to be the solver of the two heart piles. When we as industry actually take them and pilot with them, we de-risk their story to that funding community. Or if that funding community knows that they fall into that potential provider of our two hard pile, that de-risks them as well. So to the funders and many other groups that are out there, the fact that they see that connection between us as that user, that implementer, and then obviously these technologies can jump to other sectors, we're helping make those choices. So, you were saying, how does an entrepreneur actually come into CRIN? Well, they just need to join. There's no charge. CRIN, there is a social contract. So remember what I shared about the rainforest earlier. What's really important in building a network is how people show up, and that they show up with the intent to work with others. All of this collaborative stuff that we've been talking about before. and for the greater good. You know, are you bought into that you want to be a part of helping that Canada's the global leader in clean hydrocarbons from source to end use? So when you join CRIN, there's a social contract at the beginning to which you sign your name and say, I commit to behave in this way inside of this network. And once you do that, then we actually have a directory. Well, over 2,000 members now in CRIN, and an entrepreneur comes in, they can find me. My name, my telephone number, my job, all of those things are listed. They can find the financial institutions. They can find somebody else. It's linked by categories. They can find somebody else who is doing what they're doing. So I'm bringing my technology, and there's just this one thing I can't quite get right. I can reach out to somebody else in that network who says, I'm here to help you. I'm going to work with you. That's why I'm in this network. They can literally find these people inside of that network and make those connections happen. And plus, we guide them to jump into the networks for each of those theme areas. And so they come and they're a methane technology. They can jump into that network, meet the others who do what they do. They can share what their product is. Inside of that methane network is the people from my team who it's their job to understand those technologies, to bring them, to commercialize them. They can find those individuals. So what are those components that are there for them to launch? All of that is inside of the CRIN network. These digital groups are the theme areas. They hold events. They help people understand how to find different funding, etc. They share different technologies. They share, of course, our challenges inside of these so that people understand them more clearly. And they share the successes that hopefully then that can go out for adoption. So hopefully those, and what ends up happening, of course, is that entrepreneur is then attached to potentially a Canadian Natural, and we execute a pilot, and the rest is history.
What for you, Joy, when you're looking at this, I mean, you're coming out of, we do a whole mining show. So you come out of that mining, background. You've already walked through a bit of your career. Then with Canadian Natural, now with CRIN, what do you, as you start to be able to, I mean, you're still very much looking forward with everything that you're doing, but as you start to look back as well, what do you see? I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question right. Is what do you sort of see? I don't know if legacy is the right word, but it's obviously, I mean, and I've talked to you several times leading up to this interview. I mean, you're not just going through the motions. You're passionate about this, and sort of what is your, even on a personal or professional level, however you want to answer it, to sort of what you see that CRIN develops into, and sort of what, I mean, and you've outlined what it is, but just sort of that legacy that you would like to leave with CRIN as it continues on.
Well, I think none of these things, none of us do these things by ourselves. So, I have the great pleasure of being a part of forming CRIN with a number of other people who share the vision, and really it's the legacy that you would want is that you actually don't need a CRIN. And is because those connections of reaching across the silos, of people working together, looking at energy as a part of the system, oil and gas as a part of the energy system for Canada, that those barriers are removed. Hopefully we've created those pathways, a new way of working together for people that they don't even think about it. It's just natural for them to jump. If I'm designing a net zero community, I'm going to look at what are the inputs in that net zero community from an energy point of view, given where I'm geographically located inside of this country. What are the energy inputs that I can have reliable, affordable, sustainable energy for that community. And we just pull all the sources of energy that we have as a country and get that right combination for that system, for that community. And then behind all of that, and of course that model is, if you go across our country, we're so diverse and so energy rich, of all forms of energy. And then you can take that model and it's used globally. By default, your footprint is the lowest it can be, but you have enabled, like even inside of Canada, we have energy poverty, and that energy poverty is by default removed. But the other aspect of that is we waste nothing, is we take advantage of all of the resources that Canada has and used in that sustainable, responsible way, and which is so important. So that legacy isn't, and maybe, for those of us who have gray hair or no hair, or sort of in my generation, it's that legacy for those that come behind. When you asked me initially, when I started my career, and would I ever envision, it's because we have such and I grew up in the resource industry myself. That's been historically, what my family's been involved with, and my family, those that came to Canada of my heritage, and those that have been here forever, is 400 years ago, 200 years ago, has very much been involved in the resource industry. It's really important that we understand the value of the resource industry to Canada as we go forward. And CRIN is a part of that. CRIN is a part of making sure that the oil and gas industry is seen as that sustainable source of reliable, affordable energy that can be done in a responsible way with minimal footprint, whether that's greenhouse gas or water or land. But that applies to all sources of energy. All sources of energy need to be produced with a minimal footprint. So it's important that we see that. And so if there's any legacy there, it's not just my vision, it's that of the team, those that have the passion, those that sit at our steering committee table. It's that Canada is providing for the future generations that come that full breadth of opportunity that's here for us, and not to leave any of those opportunities for our future generations behind. Very important.
That's a great answer, and I have another question, because I know that people, um, like myself, that are sort of still getting involved with more organizations or starting their own organizations, and you're in a company. There's obviously performance metrics. When you're part of a volunteer organization, it's just something that came to mind, and I'm thinking of all the people that you're working with, and I'm just curious, how do you get that many people together? There's all these different personalities, these different viewpoints. How do you, and it might go back to your volunteer, I don't know, but um, how do you get sort of for lack of a better word, a good group of people together when you have so many voices and it's volunteer based? So it's not really a performance metric. Like, how do you approach that? Because that in itself is quite an achievement to get that many people at the table, and then in general, either moving the same directions or contributing their where they specialize in.
I think you need a shared vision. Is a really important thing. Actually, where I'll be jumping to right after this meeting is to a CRIN steering committee meeting. Mm. And I'm so grateful every meeting. Nobody has to show up at any of those meetings. No one. Mm. And, there's like all of these sectors that I was talking about, people from these 20 sectors, and they're very, very busy people. And they come to the CRIN meetings to drive this vision regularly. And if they can't make it, I received a note before, I can't make the meeting, Joy. So and so will replace me, and I'll catch up with you later. That is the kind of commitment that's there, and it's to all of these literally people across the country as a whole, and all of these various levels of government, all the different research institutions, the universities. Um, and it's that shared vision that Canada is a global leader, but to truly be involved in something that can drive accelerated performance and help us, help Canada be that sustainable energy leader and as a part of those whole energy systems. So um, there are a lot of people inside of this country that really believe in Canada and that this is our potential, and they want to make sure it's realized. And we give them space to do that and the voice to do that, and to do it together, because we all know none of us can do it on our own.
Hmm. Yeah, it just the reason it came to me is I've been a part of a couple organizations where it was really, the door closes at this time when the meeting starts. And but when you're a working professional, and doing a volunteer, there's a lot of commitment that it takes, but there's also responsibilities that you have over here. And I was very interested to see how someone like yourself, coming from the background that you do, organizing people that are working at a high level. I mean, they're not, they're not in these super flexible positions. And I was interested
They're
how
not.
you approach them and sort of keep everybody motivated, that someone might not be at a meeting for a couple of them, and then they got to loop back in, and sort of how you create that collaborative effort and still keep everybody involved. It's quite interesting.
Well, they all have a job.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is that every single one of those sector representatives is a representative, and they were explained when they came to the table is you actually have a job. It's not just a meeting; you have a job,
Hmm.
and the job is that in that your sector that you bring, whether it's the regulator or it's the universities or it's the municipal uh, economic development, if you whatever you sit, or it's students, um, it's how do you bring your network to the CRIN network so that the connections make across each of those networks. So it's not just that you come as your network, but how do you connect the entrepreneur here with the person in university there? How do you connect the student that wants to study oil and gas with the entrepreneur over there? What are the pathways? So if you actually look at the symbolism that we have for CRIN, it's very neural networky. It's all over the place,
Mm.
and um, because it is a network of networks. So for example, on the agenda today, some of the team areas will be presenting their work, but those people that sit there are also presenting their sector engagement plan, as we say it. So even though they're all volunteers, and I can tell you I'm doing my volunteer work at 1 in the morning, because I still have my day job to do. And I can tell from the time that the emails that are coming in from these other
Yeah.
people, so are they, but they're committed to the vision. And they know that if they actually connect that entrepreneur or connect that student or connect that researcher, that it is going to make a difference.
Hmm.
Because working in silo, they're not getting where they need to go.
Right.
So it is very important. They know that if they show up and actually execute and work with the others at the table, that the result is going to be better,
Yeah.
or else they
That's
wouldn't come back. They
yeah.
don't need to.
It's again a very good answer. I know you are a busy woman, Joy. So but I have one more question for you, and it's the
Sure.
it's one I wanted to ask it at the beginning when you were talking about actually your childhood, and but I didn't want to interrupt sort of the scope of your story. So I want to circle back to it and just ask one last question. Is you mentioned going around and growing up in these different mining towns, and your father was in the industry. Did that were you were you involved in it? Was it were you living in a town and there was a mine somewhere off, or did you get a chance to actually be involved, with the community, get to know the people that were working the mine, or even get to be on the mine at times? And did that sort of did that if the answer is yes, did that involvement did that sort of did that almost implant a love for the industry? I mean, for to be in the industry, for the length of time you have, there's a certain love that you have to have for it and a passion that you bring to it. Does that come from that? Do you think this being involved and your father being in the industry and having you around it?
Absolutely. I come from the generation, or I grew up in, as my dad at a minimum worked, 6 days a week.
Hmm.
And on Saturdays, he would take me to work. And I can remember, being with him, and he was construction management, and I would be out on dozers or big trucks moving whatever. And if any of you drive through Sparwood and Highway number 3 in on the Crowsnest Highway, um, is there's a big truck. And when that truck was actually commissioned, I was a kid, and I was one of the first people to ride in that truck with my dad. And so it's the largest truck in the world, right? And um, so very much, it was something. If you asked me when I was 6 years old, I would have told you that I was going to grow up to be an engineer and a lawyer. Absolutely the engineer, and believe me, with all the IP that I deal with, I claim honorary lawyer as well. So,
Well,
but so yeah, we are very obviously, all of us, influenced by our past, and I'm grateful for the rich Canadian history that I grew up with.
yeah, it is amazing, and I think it's a good note, one to end on, but also just for people that are bringing up kids, to get them involved and get them seeing what the industry is all about, because there will come a time when already, I mean, there's a new generation and a middle generation, and these people are going to come in, and if people come into an industry not just to make money or to get ahead, but have a deep passion for their country, for the community they're working in, for the industry they're in, that will accelerate everything. No, and that will be at the core of it. So, Joy, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. I know you're very busy, and we take up some time doing these long form interviews, so we do appreciate it. Thank you, and we hope you come back at some point.
Well, I very much appreciate being here, and I just want to put a plug in for the competitions that we have coming up
Of course.
very shortly with CRIN. We've got 80 million that will go out to projects, digital oil and gas. There'll be 5 million in that area. To low emissions value added products, there'll be 25 million there. And for water, land, and methane emissions, novel hydrocarbons, that bucket together is 50 million. And so stay tuned. Please join CRIN. See the newsletters. Join up for the newsletters. Make sure that you're aware. Entrepreneurs, find yourself a producer to link with. And we want to have the best projects that are out there applying for these funds, so that we can ensure that we make that difference.
Well, thank you, Joy, and we'll make sure to put, if you have any links, please send those through. We'll make sure to put those links, any information that people can go to for the contest and things like that. So
Great.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, everybody, that is the show for today. Some interviews are just so fun to do, and that was one of them. Howdy, how did I do today? How do you rate my interviewing skills? No, Joy was just that. Joy has so much to offer. I'm so glad we had her on the show.
Yes.
And quick shout out to Paul Painter for getting that all set up. Who's really responsible for Crownsmen Energy. He really brought it. Yeah, I mean, it took us over a year and a half to get the Crownsman show going. He got Crownsman Energy going with about 3 months. So
I know.
there you go. Gowdy, where can people follow, find, comment, suggest guests, be on the show, become a sponsor? what have you.
Well, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you'd like to be part of the show, whether it's Crownsmen Energy, the Crownsmen Show, or Mining Now, you can contact us, info@crownsmen.com. You can also check out the website, crownsmen.com. We've got all our videos on there, and a lot of other information. So please check that out. Again, follow us. Check out the YouTube channel because we've got about 2 episodes a week. Moving on to like hopefully 3.
We are moving on to 3. It is going to happen.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so definitely check that out. Yeah, and you can listen to us on Anchor and pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Gowdy. Thank you again to Joy Romero for joining us, and we will keep our eye on CRIN. They're doing some amazing things. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please subscribe. Keep talking. Keep suggesting guests. We love doing the show, and we love having you be a part of it. Thank you, and see you on the next episode.